welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson. I started the podcast off the back of the work we do in Wilkinson Accounting Solutions because I realised there was a big gap in the market for entrepreneurs and business owners who are looking to acquire or exit their business with maximum wealth. So I'm really excited today to have Charlie Norton with us. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Julie.
Charlie, just a bit of background story. So Charlie's quite active on LinkedIn. I've known him for a long time. Essentially, he's now the owner and founder of Vamos, but has a lot of experience in M&A. So he's bought around 15 businesses and sold 17. And we're going to talk today about one particular acquisition that was a distressed business where perhaps it didn't go quite to plan as expected. I'll just say that when Charlie bought it. So, but I think what's going to be really powerful about the story is obviously Charlie's so experienced, and it will go to show, one bad experience doesn't define your whole life or everything that's going to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on. Although it's an interesting story, it was also more about how you can overcome it, and it won't define everything that you do in the future. I think Charlie is one of the things that I'm really keen to look at. So yeah. But first of all, I wanted to hand over to you so you can say a bit about yourself and why you wanted to come on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, Julie, first and foremost. And obviously, we've known each other for a couple of years now, at least. And I'm always admired what you did, saving the world from failed acquisitions, deal by deal. I know you've moved on to greater things as well and widened your services. And a little bit about myself for your audience as well, for those who might not know me. So I've been in the acquisition space since I was about 18. And I used to buy very small businesses, like I'm talking about tiny businesses. I used to scrape all my monies together, like 2, 3, 4, 5 grand from my wages and whatnot, and go buy a business because I thought it'd increase my income potential. And then from 18 to 22, I sort of grew businesses as well. And then at 22, I did my first full leverage buyout. And what I did back then, I didn't realize there was a whole industry. I didn't know those acquisitions meant back then, or M&A. I literally just saw it as I need to grow my business. If I acquire this business, it comes into my group and we have more income and cash flow and revenue drivers. At the time when I was that young, I was probably just thinking money at the time. And then I actually exited leverage buyout 2.5 years later. We went from about 200 grand a year turnover to 800 grand a year turnover. We sold to one of our customers in the end. And then I started buying other sort of businesses that I had a niche in, like vehicle recovery, vehicle logistics, HGV training, driver recruitment. I even went outside my niche sometimes. Like I had a seafood supplier business once. I had a music studio once. And my strongest advice, as a quick note, is to never buy outside your niche for stuff you don't know. It's just, it never works out well. You might know generic business terminology and how to improve businesses, which I did, but, you're on a vast learning experience. When I bought that music studio, I found out more about audio technology, or when I bought that seafood suppliers, I decided knowing all about shellfish and I don't even eat shellfish personally. But I actually met my missus through that business, funny enough. She had a small seafood stall in a nice posh part of the country, and we was one of the suppliers. So that's how I met her actually originally, as well as being a gymnast coach. And then, so fast forward, I've done, 15 acquisitions, sold 17 businesses. I've also closed down businesses, I'm going to not just highlight the good stuff, and I'm sure we're going to talk about one of the most recent disastrous acquisitions I encountered. And it was actually funny. I was growing a HGV training group at the time, and then I come across this particular school in Derby. And at the time, this was about 2.5 years ago now, the broker said to me, the asking price is £1.2 million. And just to give your audience a bit more detail about why they valued it at 1.2, obviously brokers being brokers, and we'll talk a bit more about their own valuations maybe at some point. So the business done £900,000 in annual turnover with around 300,000 profit, and I'm going to say net profit or EBITDA. I use them words interchangeably. I know it's probably a sin in your world, but I'll just use them words interchangeably for now. So there's around 300 grand a year profit, and they've owned 1.2 million, so 4x on that, on the multiplier value. And I said, I'm not going to pay 1.2. I actually offered £800,000 at the time. That was my guesstimate valuation, I suppose, at the time. And I'll talk more about valuations a bit after. But anyway, they rejected that offer. They said that's too little. I went, fair enough. I'll pull out the deal as it stands. And then 18 months after their event, they came back to me because they couldn't sell the business. What happens with most brokering clients, overvaluation, under deliverance of actual getting the business sold. They came back to me, and the business changed a little bit. And so did my priorities, actually, because I already brought a couple other training schools month span. So we actually grew as a group already. And my expectations on buying a training school was slightly different then. So that we agreed 18 months later, the business was worth about 300,000, because they incurred additional debts of around 140,000. Might have been 120 or 140. I have to double check certain things. It's sort of been a bit of a blur sometimes. I've written it down. But yeah, let's say 140, just keep it simple. And I said, I think it's worth 300,000 now, judging what you've told me at this present time. And this was January last year in 2024. So we begun the due diligence and heads of terms process. So signed the heads of terms at 300,000, begun the due diligence. And whilst my legal due diligence has always been covered by my lawyers, because I've done a lot of my own financial due diligence in the past and never been stung at this point, I thought I'll just do it myself. Fatal error, as I'm sure we'll go into in just a moment. So from January to March 22nd in 2024. Sorry, March 22nd was the day I actually bought the business, but 2 weeks prior, we was going to sign the completion for 300,000, and I drove all out to Derby, really excited to complete another deal. I love making good deals. At the time, I thought it was going to be a good deal. And then I drove up to Derby, ready to sign the SPA. And they slapped me a letter from their landlord, because they had two sites. One was their main site where they'd run the classroom-based courses, and one was another site where they'd done the HGV storage and reversing. And the one with the HGV storage and reversing, that rent roll was around £6,000 a month from memory, might be a bit higher. And they've been sacked with a statutory demand for 9 months unpaid rent. Which was quite a bit. And obviously I wasn't aware they haven't been paying this, because at the time I've seen bank statements for the other site being paid rent. So I just assumed that was the rent being covered. And they slapped me the stat demand. And bear in mind, this was a Monday afternoon I got to Derby, and they received the stat demand on the Friday. So it would be nice, considering usually in constant communication as buyer and seller, especially towards the near completion, just talk about the business in general, for them to inform me that that was the case. So I've gone away to Derby, and they've shown me a statutory demand for unpaid rent. And they didn't, they made out they didn't understand what it meant. They've never seen one of these before. They don't understand what it means. And I explained to them clearly, it's a legal demand to pay this monies within 21 days, otherwise they're going to take you to bankruptcy court and potentially wind the company up. So I said, look, I'm not going to sign this SPA. I'm pulling out the deal, because I just found it a bit dishonest at the time, and that should have been the one of the biggest red flags at the time for me not to do the deal. So I pulled out the deal at the time, and over that period of 2 weeks, we still chatted a little bit. It went quiet for the first couple of days, but we still continued communication. And eventually, 2 weeks after, I said, look, I'll buy the business, but obviously it's clearly in distress. Yeah, and I always find with distressed purchases, there's always something hidden that you probably are not made aware of anyway. Usually it's operational staff, something under the hood of the bonnet that you haven't seen with a distressed business. So I actually agreed in the end to buy it for £1 and carry on the debts. And that was 2 weeks after, on March 22nd. We signed the deal for £1. They also stayed on as consultants and instructors as part of the business, like part time, just help out handover period and whatnot. So yeah, I've signed the business for £1. And then it took about a day or two in this business to find out the debts weren't 140 or 120,000, wherever they were. There was actually 204,000.
Okay, so you got the balance sheets, you found out about this debt, which meant that ultimately everything that had been done prior was just now out of the works, because obviously they didn't make the profits because they hadn't been reporting all the costs, essentially, because they hadn't been paying everything. Then they basically, within that then a couple of weeks, you renegotiated and said, look, it's not worth anything now, essentially, because you hadn't disclosed these costs. So I'll take on the risk of the debt, which you thought was a certain amount off the balance sheet, and you paid the £1 for them to stay on, to essentially you were then going to turn it around and, you know, build the business back up and obviously clear the debts. Is that the principle of what happened?
Yes, essentially. Summary. Yeah, to summarise that. And it's funny, actually, within 48 hours of owning the business, I injected around £40,000 of my own monies into the business to clear the immediate debts, i.e. the statutory demand, and other debts, like there was staff that haven't been paid for 2 or 3 months. And I know, yeah. And to me, because I think they disguised they was paying in cash, that's why I couldn't see it on the bank statements. And because they were still working happily, I assumed that was the case. So I sort of took that on face value, and the fact the staff were still working there and they was meant to be their best friends and family and, you know, all this camaraderie style running of the company. So I found that actually 2 of the instructors weren't paid for 2.5 months, which was equated to about £3,500 each. One of the office ladies there was underpaid £400. And that was just, you know, the icing on the cake, you know, compared to the actual amount of debts that were there. Within 48 hours, I paid all these, well, I thought were priority bills. So obviously the statutory demand, but then obviously the people as well. I just paid their wages, all the overdue amounts, because I don't think anyone should work without getting paid, especially staff. I think you've got to take care of staff as a priority. You know, the company is a group of people at the end of the day. Without them, you don't have a business, you know. So I paid them up front, or overdue.
And I just want to touch on something there as well, because interestingly, I was doing a presentation, an event about, because one of the things we were talking about before we did the podcast was the work we do on governance and controls.
Yes.
And one of the biggest things, especially in acquisitions, so whether you're selling, is I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners aren't always sure of their sort of legal obligations. So, you know, earlier you were saying sometimes it's not always finance, it could be operational issues. I think what's interesting about cash and finance is actually most things eventually that happen in the business will end up impacting the financial somewhere. But like going back to what you said about the staff not being paid and being paid cash, those types of things, even if the debt itself that's probably not materially big in terms of the grand scheme of a business. But when we're looking at businesses, whether someone's buying it or whether someone's trying to sell it, or we're just looking at their structure in general, we're like, but what is the risks associated with the way they're actually behaving, like the way they're trading? Because if they're paying employees in cash, the fact that it's not there on the balance sheet would then, first of all, disclose or tell you, well, they're not then recording the cash they're taking. So perhaps the profit was understated because the sales weren't actually there because they wasn't reporting the cash in the first place. Now, whether they were doing that morally, or whether they were just doing it because they didn't know. I don't know. You never really know, do you? But then you've got the second thing, haven't you, is that they're then paying people with cash. So the principle isn't maybe just the fact that they weren't paid. One of the questions has to be, but are they putting their employees at risk? And what culture are they now doing? Because if you came in, I know you came in and paid it, so perhaps they all really liked you, but let's just say nobody was underpaid and everyone had been paid fully. And then you come into a business and everyone's used to being paid cash and no one's paying any tax, because that's effectively what's going to be happening. Even if there's small numbers in terms of the wages, if you came in and said to everyone, right, I've now got to change this because you as the buyer don't want to trade unethically, which is what's happening, because legally things like that have could have serious consequences. Even if financially their amount's not a lot, the ethos behind how you're trading is unethical. Yes, and perhaps illegal to some degree. But then would the staff then actually walk out? If you actually just change the methodology, what would happen?
Yeah, well, as I come to find out, they didn't get paid anything, cash or normal bank transfer or payroll. And to be honest with you, the owners were very crooked. And I'll just give you one example. They was paying themselves whilst knocking off their own staff for monies, about £1,200 a week through I suspect, a dead person's account. Which is crazy. I remember on the first day, the previous owner said to me, "Oh yeah, that's my secret way of paying myself to avoid tax." I know. And I remember, because I've got a council of, other business owners, including my father and other people I trust in business, I speak to on the regular. And I remember saying to them on the first day of this acquisition, and my solicitor at the time, who's a good friend as well, and I said to her, I can't believe he's just told me that. Me, out of all people, the guy who's now in charge, who dictates the financial future of this business to a degree. I can't believe he's just told me that. I laugh about it now because, trust me, I was crying at one point, towards the end of this fiasco. But he's paying him and his wife. And funny enough, when it was sort of went to boiling point towards the end, and this was an 8-week period, it went from me signing it for £1, finding out all these nuances and catastrophes in the business, and actually me closing down the business. It took me 8 weeks period. And I'll explain why I closed it down in just a second. But yeah, it was a circus show, I must admit. And whilst I was happy to buy the business with the debts, and even the undisclosed debts wasn't the actual major issue of why I closed the business down, because I'm very much one in people, if the back's against the wall, I'm ready to go out guns blazing, try and turn around a business, drive more sales, cut more costs. I know it sounds very simplistic, probably in your world. I'm very simple man when it comes to business, but I was ready to take on that challenge. In fact, I was really excited to turn this business around because they had a really enviable site. They had a lot of good trading history, good customer base. We had contracts with Amazon, DHL, and now we're just stretching to my other schools around the country, and really could have been a strong turnaround for that business and our group, in terms of a good revenue driver. So I was really excited. The problem, and one of the main reasons why I closed it down, not just the hidden debts and costs going and spiraling out of control that wasn't disclosed. After every day, I think I'd have like an hour or two of the previous owners storming into my office in Derby and demanding that I did certain things, like, "Oh, you need to pay this bill," because they had personal guarantees on certain things, which I never signed over, because I was like, I'm not going to PG something when you've already lied to me about a vast amount of debts. One of them, for instance, they lent, just from memory, about £17,000 from Funding Circle in between January to closure in March, and they said that was used to pay off a VAT bill, but they didn't pay off the VAT bill. And they didn't pay Funding Circle back. They just used it to continue to pay themselves. Unbelievable, really. It is really unbelievable. But then, other than them being corrupt and crooked financially and trying to sort of leave me the bag with all the undisclosed debts and put the pressure on me and use me as a scapegoat, to be honest with you, why the business was going into disrepair, even though it's been in disrepair for 2 years and there was accreditations and maintenance companies not paid for over a year, so these problems were here well before I came into the picture. And then towards the end, it was the last week after the 8-week period, the last week around May point, middle of May, and the former owner barged in my office and started pointing his finger at me saying, "You're a crook. You're a crook." And I'm just sitting there on my laptop, tapping away, trying to crack on with work. He's saying, "You're a crook." Da, da, da. And his reason for saying that is because I didn't pay one of the PG debts he has from the business 1 month's payment. I was like, well, it's just simply because of cash flow. I've paid out all these debts and I'm waiting for the cash flow cycle to come back round to then pay them. Unlike yourself, to the former seller, I said, I don't just pay or jump up and down when people ask me to pay. I have 2 payment runs every month as part of my processes, and they're going to have to, go through the proper process, through the accountant. We put it on the payment run, we sign it off, it'll get paid on that date. That's how we do things in my group of companies, personally. And then he after he said that, and we had a bit of a debate about that particular instance, he then turned around and said to me, he said, "Look, if you don't give me back the company for £1, bear in mind, I've already shoved in 40 grand of actual monies, then my time, my accountant's time. I even hired a managing director at that point to actually run the group, but he's particularly focused on this business because the distress part of it." And he said, "If you don't give me back the company," and this was on Monday, "everyone's going to leave. Like the whole staff are going to leave unless you give me back the company for £1." I was like, oh God, that's not good. And I've actually had that before, much earlier, back when I brought my first leverage deal, which was HGV school when I was 22. I had a similar sort of threat of mutiny before. So I thought, okay, I've been through this. I survived. And the company survived. I can tackle this head on. So I spoke to all the staff individually, and all but one of the frontline instructors said, "No, I'm happy to stay. I just want work. I don't want dramas. I just want to get paid for my work." Great. Funny enough, the one instructor that didn't was their best friend, who they didn't pay for 2.5 months' wages, was so adamant that they would go with the sellers, which fair enough, whatever. I'm not too fussed about that. But then the thing that was the kicker, so on that Monday, he threatened that. The Tuesday, the operations manager, who was their daughter-in-law, just walked out of the business, gave me a resignation there, no notice, and just walked out of the business. So that was a kick in the teeth, which, I can handle that to a degree, crack on and hopefully replace them long term. So that week, basically all the admin operations team have left due to the sellers sort of, I don't know what he had on them to make them do that, obviously, other than being one of family relation. I remember sitting there, the solicitors that are involved in the deal, the sellers, and a couple of members of my council I brought into the meeting just to, try and thrash out how we proceed after all this cataclysmic event, and it was a lot of accusations being thrown, and I said to him, "Look, if you can present me an offer to buy me out again, I'll happily leave, because this is so stressful." And I think a lot of people don't explain that when they're pushing these peddling courses and no money downs. Actually running a business, as you'll be aware, is quite a stressful gig in itself. And I do like the stress, to be honest with you, but this was extremely stressful. I don't want to be called or accused of being a crook or anything like that. But they was trying to, we sort of said to them, "Look, you can approach to buy me out if you're adamant you want to take back on this distressed business. All I'd like is all the money I've put into the business and a little bit of compensation for my time I've spent, because I haven't spent in my other businesses." And they sort of laughed, at the fault that I've put any money into the business. They're like, "Oh, we've only used the business's money to pay the debts off." I went, "Well, don't know, in the 8 weeks, the business's revenues have increased I've made more social media posts. I've increased some of the prices, you know. So yeah, the business has performed better under my stewardship. You're right, but that's not the money I spent in the first 3 hours clearing the decks with some of the bad debts, because they just thought I bought it for £1. I've used the business's revenues to sort out the debts, which certainly wasn't the case. And then I think it was on the Sunday afternoon, you know, after much deliberation with myself and other people I trusted advisors, that I took a memorandum on the business activities and temporarily closed the business down, simply because it was just too much of an overstretch, you know, with all the hidden debts, the operational issues with the staff leaving, and just the crooked nature of the former sellers. It was so much to deal with. So I temporarily closed the business down while we sorted out how we was going to proceed, whether it was going to be full liquidation or we tried to exit through another buyer. And we did offer out to other potential local competitors and buyers, people who are national groups and local competitors, you know, who basically my competition when I was buying in the HGV training market. You know, I know them well. And some of them had caveats, we'd want to try and work with former sellers on this. And they even had negotiations, couldn't work out with the former sellers. And unfortunately couldn't sell the business, so eventually had to be liquidated into official receivership, which is still part of that process now. Which I've been interviewed by the official receivers. I've told them exactly what I've told you. It is a shame, and I don't regret anything. I do wish I got proper financial due diligence, like with someone like yourself. But some things I feel like could have been avoided, i.e. their crooked ways and their concealment of certain things. Some things could have been spotted as well, you know, definitely. Like you told me before, you know, you could have noticed the trends year on year to see the changes and maybe picked up on certain things. You know, just in my humble opinion, I think we would have found out a lot, like 90% of the things financially with a proper team like yourself. But I think there was just that extra 10%, i.e. the people in the business, the pay tax-free through the dead person's account, you know, all this weird and crazy things. I think I weren't to know until I was actually had my feet under the desk. But it is what it is, really. It's a good lesson learned. And even, like you said at the beginning of this, even so with my experience, you can come unstuck. And you know, just because I bought it for £1 doesn't mean it actually cost £1. It costs a lot of time and money. And actually, to be honest with you, Julie, I spent a lot of time in A&E after that event because of the high stress levels. I thought I was had probably bad chest pains and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And it probably has turned me into a hypochondriac, as my dad likes to call me now. So yeah, it's a wonderful experience. I've got to look back in positive, because if I don't go through these experiences, I can't protect myself or my family in the future. I can't, you know, advise people, you know, be careful, or at least get proper financial due diligence done by someone like yourself, you know, to help avoid these pitfalls. And yeah, after that, and it's actually funny because of that event with the Derby school and the stress that it entailed, I actually decided to sell my other training schools and exit the group of companies, because I think I was sort of reflecting on the journey overall, and it's not been an easy journey, you know, running a professional vocational training school where all the staff are twice my age and vastly qualified and skilled. And in order to become an instructor in certain fields that we taught, you talk about 6-7 years of training. And whilst I am qualified to teach and instruct on certain courses we do, and I'm a qualified transport manager and consultant, it's not an industry I was passionate about. You know, I grew up in the transport industry, but I was never passionate about it. I'm passionate about businesses in general. So I sold a group of companies last May, shortly after the closure of the Derby business, because I was speaking to other national buyers in the field about the Derby business. Yeah, I say, yeah, this has been terrible. I'm happy to have a cut price deal with you, you know, a flexible deal. obviously the conversations carried on where I actually turned around and said, actually, do you want to buy my little group and put it into your bigger group of companies? And they did, it's a good exit, one that I wouldn't have to work for the foreseeable future anymore. I can't not work. I love working and I love business. And I was sitting there, and actually, I'd say you and my solicitor and people like yourselves were a bit of inspiration about my next move, about, assisting business owners with exits and having a bit more time flexibility, because I had a newborn daughter recently. And at the time I found out my partner was pregnant. So I was thinking more about the future. Obviously I wanted to be fit, healthy, but also wanted to be around my daughter when she came. And, I have been, fortunately, it's been great. And that's what led me on to become a business broker or MMA advisor, depending on what you'd like to call it. And really going into a new industry, I had personal experience with most brokers in the UK and EU and setting my own businesses, buying my own businesses. I sort of wanted to come into the industry to help disrupt it a bit. And I found some of the biggest problems with business brokers in general, especially the larger corporations, so I'm not going to name them, they tend to overvalue a business just to get this business seller to sign on with them for high extortionate upfront fees, and usually under deliver because there's no buyers who are interested in a 4 or 5 times multiple advertised business. So it quite hindered the process, in my opinion, of business sales. Just for instance, just referring back to my Derby business I bought, they valued at 1.2 million 18 months before I bought it for £1, and that's quite different, yeah.
And I think the stories, I'm just kind of sitting here in awe. I've never quite heard a story like it, to be honest, Charlie. I'm speechless, and that never happens. I would say, because people ask me about financial, obviously we offer financial due diligence. I don't sit here and teach people to suck eggs at the end of the day. People have their own risk appetite for deals. And my view, when people ask me about financial due diligence, I just say, look, for me, it's a bit like insurance. At the end of the day, you make a decision what insurance you take out on a business, the same way you make a decision on what financial and legal due diligence, any due diligence really on the business. And, if you're choosing to minimize it because you think you can do it yourself, in the end, it is a bit like insurance, isn't it? Like, you could have insurance forever and never use it, but the one time you need it is the time you want it. But that doesn't mean that everything you've done in the past is wrong. It just means, it might make you think differently of how you do in the future. But what I honestly believe is, if you are going to do that and people are going to do a bit of their own DD, fair enough. Everyone's got their own risk appetite. They can choose what they want to do. What I think is important, though, is people have the money for the advisors after the acquisition, because it sounds like you have got some advisors, but especially when we do sort of post-acquisition consultancy, and when we look at these things like governance and controls, there can just be a support network there of people to help on board and fight and help with these things immediate, especially if in the DD you have a gut feeling that something might not fully be right, even if you might not know to what extent. If you don't find it in DD, fair enough, but you can put it in afterwards. But you do need some cash flow, I think, to have the people there to help you. Because like you say, as the person who's bought it, it's hard enough anyway when you buy a business to, there's lots of things you have to do, even if you're not working in it, just everything, you've got the responsibility now of growing this business, making sure it doesn't go under, paying the deferrals, and I think just the mental side of that is hard enough, isn't it? Let alone having to come in and go, oh my God, I need my cash flow building. I need my management accounts building. Oh, I need my system changing. I need my KPIs building. Oh, they don't have a sales report. Like all these sorts of things are just like, well, who does them? Because if they don't have them, then there is nobody there to do it, which means you need more cash to invest in other people. That's what I believe.
100%, and I'm not going to disagree with you on that. It's funny, actually, whilst you were saying about the governance and post-acquisition and the control mechanisms you can implement, it actually reminded me, on day 2, their bookkeeper, end-of-year accountant resigned. And that was their family friend they used for years, who actually was the company secretary at the time of formation and had them the whole life cycle of the business up until that point. And it was more because when I was doing my own financial due diligence, I was like, oh, can you send me up-to-date management accounts? Can you send me the age debtors and creditors? And she was quite a hindrance to that process. And I think it was because she didn't keep the system up to date. And he had a really, I've never ever used this software before for accountancy, bookkeeping. It wasn't Sage, it wasn't Zero, it wasn't QuickBooks. It was just this wonderful one I've never seen before, right? And it was easy enough to understand once you logged in, but even that was a challenge to get a login to actually go through it. And yeah, bookkeeper, accountant, whatever she'd like to call herself, just was a constant hindrance to the process. And I should have really, I think I was too eager to buy the revenue, turn the business around, be the hero of the day, where I overlooked the red flags that, you sound like yourself would obviously seen. And even I saw, throughout the process, but I kind of just, tinted covered glasses, and I just overlooked these things and carried on regardless. It's just one of the things. I think it's a good lesson learned going forward. And whilst no money down deals and leverage buyouts are possible, I have done them in the past, they just carry so much risk, where, and this is why I've started Vamos, actually, because I said to myself, do I want to go on another buy, build and sell journey again, which I've done multiple times now, or do I just want to bootstrap and start a business that I have set the standards and procedures, the culture, how we actually run the business? Because when you buy a business, even if it's a good business you've bought, you're buying someone else's culture, procedures, systems, really. And then even to change management, that process is always going to rock the apple cart a bit. Even silly little things like, as I said, well, you're severely in debt and you actually owed a calf £3,000 of sandwiches. So let's just stop that today, and the staff, are in uproar at this point. Oh, we've always done this. I'm like, well, it's clearly not working. I was made out to be a scapegoat in that process because I came in a bit guns blazing in terms of the process changes and the financial instruments we had to do in order to try and turn around that business. And it's not nice, a new guy, a Londoner, a Cockney Londoner coming in, a young bloke, very stereotypical. Oh, he's ruining the business, so to speak, rather than the trusted fellows stewards who've steered this business into success. I say that with quotation marks because it was in dire straits, but it was well hidden from the staff. To them, it was all going smooth, wonderful, even though people weren't getting paid. I don't know how you could pull that wool over someone's eye, because if I wasn't getting paid, I'd just leave. Personally. And actually, younger man, I'm a commodities broker. I got signed to a town in the Netherlands, in Amstelveen, and I was owed my paycheck and they didn't pay me that month. And I remember saying to the boss, I was like, well, if you're not paying me, why am I here? So I just flew home and I quit. That was it, I think that's a very basic terms of employment. You trade your time for money. And if you've traded,
you should get your money.
You should get your money. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, Charlie, we're coming to the end of the podcast. I feel really privileged that you've shared, first time you've really shared it. Because it's like I say, I've never quite been this gobsmacked before, but thanks so much for coming on and share it and telling us a bit about Vamos as well, because I know that you've got so much experience to help people with. And I just want to say thanks to all the listeners. If you love the episodes, hit the subscribe button and I'll see you again soon.